To God be the glory.
Welcome back, Talmudim, to class number 14, also lesson number 14 in our textbook. This is on page 79 in your book, if you want to turn, so we'll all be starting on the right page here. Once again, we're continuing to expand our vocabulary, and I hope that your attitude about the vocabulary is one that's positive. It's obviously it's kind of hard to understand and read a language if you don't know the vocabulary, so continue to work with the vocabulary, learn these words, practice them, take out your flashcards and work on these things and practice them as much as you are able to, and practice writing them both ways, from Hebrew to English and English to Hebrew. Learning the proper way that these things are spelled, of course, because especially this lesson you're going to find the significance of being able to do that. Alright, let's now look at the vocabulary that we have here on page 79. First, looking at the nouns. The first one is the word for mountain, which is pronounced har, and mountains plural would be harim. Now, right off the bat, you'll notice that there's something a little bit unusual about that, and that is that the word mountain, singular, har, has the patak underneath the hay. And then we go over to the harim, and suddenly that hay takes on a comets. That's just one of the unique things that takes place with this word mountain, harim. All right, the word for land and earth, you might want to jot down in your book an additional definition. Earth, land, and ground. Put ground in there as another definition of this particular word. It's pronounced adamah, adamah, and the plural would be adamot, adamot. All right, the word for tent is ohel, ohel, and the word for tent in the plural is ohalim, ohalim. Messenger or angel, just like in Greek, we also in Hebrew have the same word that means messenger and angel, and this is malak, and then the plural would be malakim, malakim. Eternity, our world, is the word olam, and in the plural it's olamim, olamim. Now, this is a word that we're going to talk a little bit about in our last lesson when we talk about some Hebrew word studies. We know that this particular word has gotten considerable attention as to whether it means forever and ever and ever and ever and never ever ending, or whether it can be something that does have a limited time or duration. And so we'll study that particular word, olam, later on. Next, the masculine word for apple is tafuach, tafuach, and then in the plural would be tafuchim, tafukim. All right, and then the word for tablet is luach, luach, and tablet in the plural, and notice that this is a masculine word, but it does take the feminine ending. It would be luchot, luchot. And then finally, the word for city is ir, and the plural is arim. Now, notice that city is a feminine word, but in the plural, it does take the masculine plural ending. All right, let's go on to the verbs. Continuing to add to our list some very important verbs. First, to remember is zachar, zachar. To ride is rachav, rachav. To go out, yatsa, yatsa. To sit is the word Yashav. Yashav, to know, is Yada. To see, Ra'ah. To steal is Ganav. Ganav. All right, those are some new vocabulary words that you need to work on and learn, and of course you'll need to learn those things and know them before you're able to do the exercises at the end of this particular lesson. All right, now we've talked about some things, and we want to go to the chalkboard to demonstrate this about the basic verb pattern that we have in Hebrew. All right, now the verb pattern in Hebrew is simpler than it is, say, in another language such as German or French. Almost all Hebrew verbs consist of 3 letters. All right, let's take the verb, for example, to give. All right, 3 letters, the triliteral root, just as we've talked about all along. These verbs usually have only one basic meaning, and that is give, to give. All right, another example is the word lamad, or lamed, mem, dalet. 1, 2, 3, 3 letters. The triliteral root, once again, only have one basic meaning. Now, when we conjugate a verb, we add certain letters to the beginning, which we would call prefixes, to the middle, such as when we're adding our O, and to that our holum, that would be called an infix, or we add something to the end, which would be called, of course, a suffix, that are added to the root. And notice this they are the same for all verbs. All right, so we take this word to learn. Say, I want to write I learn, or I have learned. Well, we make that la mad ti. I have learned. All right, and with this particular word up here, we'll go ahead and take away the final noon. If I want to say I gave, na tanti, na ta neti, and it will la madti. Here we go. That would be, that would go all together. Na tanti, like that. And so that's what's happened when we add this. When we add something to the end of the word, it doesn't make any difference what verb you're talking about. In the same way, when we form the first person singular of the imperfect tense, what we do is we put something to the prefix. All right, so let's keep our triliteral roots up there. Demonstrate what we're talking about here. All right, here's the imperfect when I'm trying to say, I shall give. Now notice this. We add an aleph to the beginning of that. All right, so we prefix an aleph. I shall give. And I shall learn. It would go like that. And then the pointing would be like this. This takes a shavah like that. And then, a segol, and then a shavah. And then this has an O right there, holum. So both of these are the same, and any verb that you want to use as an example is all going to be the same way. We could go ahead and give one more example. Let's take the word for write. All right, say I shall write. Put the aleph in the beginning of that, and it'll go like that, and then put the O right there, which means I shall write. So in all of these 3 examples, we're still keeping the triliteral root, and of course that's what we're emphasizing. Make sure that you know the 3 main letters of the verb, and then we add a little something to it. All right, now you might be saying, this is a little bit strange. I didn't think that the aleph could take a segol like that by itself when it begins a word. Well, that's one of the things that's an exception about this certain type of verb, is that we are going to let that aleph hang out there without a composite shavah. It's just going to take the regular segol all by itself. All right, now, another thing that we're going to learn about this is that the medieval term for the verb is this word right here. Fa'al. Be pointed like that with the dog-h in there. Fa'al. And the biblical meaning is action or deed or something that conveys the idea that something is happening. Now, since the root of Hebrew verbs consists of 3 letters, grammarians in the Middle Ages called the first root letter of any verb pay, the second root letter of any verb ayin, and the third lamed. All right, so this is what we're talking about. This is 1. This is 2. This is 3. All right, so this, going back over to here, what we were looking at earlier with these examples, if whatever was the first letter is called a pay verb, this right here would be a pay aleph verb. But if we took this off, just went back to our regular verbs, of course the aleph was not a part of the triliteral root, this would be called a pay noon verb, a pay lamed verb, a pay kaf verb. All right, if the second letter is an ayin, this would be called an ayin tav verb, or an ayin mem verb, or an ayin tav verb. So these right here would be in the same class if we were trying to emphasize that. And then the lamed represented the third. All right, so this would be a lamed nun verb, or a lamed dalet verb, or a lamed bet verb. You say, well, good grief, why do they do that? Why don't they just call it the first letter of this verb and the second letter of this verb and so on and so forth? And sometimes I think it's just to confuse us, make things a little bit tougher on us, but that's not really the point. All right, so if we look at the following verbs, and I'll just go ahead and take off these things that we're writing on there. We got these verbs. Let's add a couple of more over here. We add the word amar, add the verb to sit, and then the word to come, which is one that we learned earlier, and then also an additional one to see. All right, in the first one, this one right up here, it begins with an aleph. All right, so that is called a pay aleph verb, a pay aleph verb. And in this one, this would be called a pay yod verb. Once again, going back over to here, pay means number 1. So the first letter is, the number 1 letter is a yod. The number 1 letter is an aleph. The number 1 letter is a bet, or a resh. So all we're trying to do is identify the various things that we have that begin these particular letters. All right? Now the book points out to us that at this stage that we're concerned with regular, or what's called strong verbs. And these are verbs which preserve their 3 root letters throughout the different verbal inflections. All right, now these right here, for example, might be examples of what we're talking about. If we have the word shamar, to guard, which I don't have up on the board right now, but that's going to keep its 3 letters no matter what happens, no matter what you want to do to it. It's not going to change its triliteral root, and that's one thing that makes it easy. Now, however, there are 4 particular letters that are not, some of them are gutturals, and so that makes it a little bit easier to remember, that whenever these things happen, they can take a different form. These 4 letters are actually 5 letters. would be the aleph, the hey, the vav, and the yod. And then the reason I said 4 instead of 5 and then added it 5 is because the noon, when it begins, is one that is considered a weak verb. So any verb that has one of these 4 letters in it is considered a weak verb. And any verb that begins with a noon is considered a weak verb. All right, so we look back up here to this one. We notice that begins with a noon. All right, natan, to give. That is a weak verb. All right, so that's something that we need to recognize. Now, what's the big deal? Why are they trying to go through all this with us? Well, the purpose is to identify characteristics of verbs that are unique. And when these verbs are going to have things added onto them, because they have one of these 4 letters, something may drop out. And because it has these weak letters and something will drop out, you may have a little trouble recognizing that particular verb unless you understand the triliteral root. And you say, well, that was a pay yod verb, and so the yod ended up getting knocked off because it's weak. Well, that's something that you wouldn't understand. All right, we're using this particular example since this is called a pay yod verb. It has as its first letter a yod, so it's called a pay yod verb. This means that the first letter of the root or the pay of the po'al, which we were talking about way over here, is a yod. In the same way, we were looking at some of these other words. Let's write a couple more down here. Say we have this verb here. I'll go ahead and square this off since this is our key here. That's what we're trying to emphasize. Take the word bana. All right, and these are verb that this would be called, and just like this word way down over here, if we get back to this word, what's the same between these 2 words, this one right here, and then this one back up here? Well, both of them are what's called lamed hey verbs. Now, why are they called lamed hey verbs? Because the third letter is a hey, right there, and then right there. And that's our key right there. So if the first letter is a certain thing, then it's called a pay whatever. If the second letter is a certain thing, then it's called an ayin whatever verb. And this example right here and this example right down here, these are called lamed hey verbs. And that's just what that means. And so if you hear or you read in your textbook in future lessons that something's called a pay yod verb, then you know that it's a class of verbs that begins right here. Its first letter is a yod. A pay aleph verb. A pay bet verb. A pay rosh verb. This would be a ayin mem verb. Now mem and sheen and those are not one of these weak ones. Basically what we're talking about are these 4 letters over here. And those are only the 4 classes you really need to worry about. You've got a pay aleph, or you have an ayin aleph, or a lamed aleph, but basically those, and so on. But basically those are the 4 that we are concerned about. So this is your key. Make sure you write this down and you understand what it is that we're talking about here. And so in future lessons, when I say, now this is a pay yod verb, you'll understand that I'm talking about a verb that's first letter is a yod. It's a pay yod, first letter yod verb. All right, that is sometimes a little bit confusing, but I hope that we've gone slow enough that you've been able to get that. All right, also, I want to talk a little bit more about the perfect tense. And remember, perfect means what? It means action completed. Not something that is going to be completed. That's imperfect. But something that's completed, past tense. And we talked about that. And what thing is really nice about this is that when we have the perfect tense in various lessons that we've looked at, that these suffixes are going to be the same for the perfect tense in all Hebrew verbs. All right, so here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different verbs written down here. And when we want to add on the perfect tenses to this, I have gone, or I have given, or you have given, or they have given, or they came, or they wrote, or I wrote, and I learned, and so on. It doesn't make any difference. The suffixes that we add to these are all going to be the same. All of them are going to be the same, and that's one of the blessings of studying Hebrew, and one of the things that makes it a whole lot easier than studying this in another language. All right, another thing we were talking about, and you may have noticed this just a minute ago, I said if I wanted to make this I wrote, then I do this, I added that to the end of it, and it was spelled out like this. Say, all right, now wait a minute. I thought I wrote, or would be ani. That I'd put ani on that. I. Well, actually, you don't need this. You don't need this because this is going to be part of the verb. So I wrote, or I had written, or I have written is what we have right here. And as a result of that, we really don't need the ani. It's to say, well, if that's the case, why on earth did we even learn these personal pronouns? All right, the reason we learned these personal pronouns is, let's say that I wanted to really emphasize who it was that wrote. All right, so I could say like this, I have written. I have written. And so the personal pronoun is added on that for the purpose of emphasis. All right, let me give you another example of what we're talking about. Wanted to say you knew. All right, we know that the triliteral root for knew is that right there. Yod, Daleth, Ayin. The masculine you knew is like that. And the pointing is the same on all these. And so it'd be like that. All right, that means you knew. But what if we want to emphasize that you knew? Not just, you knew something, but you knew. Then we add the personal pronoun meaning you. Ata yadata. You knew. Or as the book tells us, it is you who knew. And they give us an excellent example right there in the book from Genesis chapter 3 and verse 12, where we have this basic form that where we have the words min ha'etz, ha'isha, he nata li. It says the woman whom it was she who gave me from the tree. All right, so we have not just, well, I should have left Genesis 3:12 up there because that's what we're talking about. Not just the word she gave, which would be like this, the feminine ending on to that. Not to na. It wasn't just she gave. That's not what Adam said. What Adam said was that right there. It is she who gave. So he uses the personal pronoun for the sake of emphasizing that it wasn't just she gave, but she who gave, trying to underscore the emphasis that she is the one that has done this. All right? Now, let's go back to the chart over here on the perfect tense, looking at the verb shamar, to guard, or to keep, on the bottom of page 81. Now, once again, what we're doing is we're taking this particular verb and we're bringing it all the way down in the singular and the plural. Now, this is a very, very important section that you learn what we're doing right here. All right, first of all, the singular, I have kept, or I kept, or I had kept, and the masculine, feminine are both going to take the same ending, and that would be the ani. That's, of course, our personal pronoun I. Be shamarti. Shamarti. All right, and then the next one, if you wanted to say you have kept, and that would be being expressed in the masculine, that would be ata shamarta. All right, now what we're saying here before we continue on, we're saying in the parentheses that that personal pronoun you in the masculine, ata, over there on the far right, second one down, that particular pronoun is expressed already in the verb with the very ending, the tav, and the hey right below that. And so by pointing to this, what we're saying is this right here is the same as that. So this right here is absorbed into the verb and is expressed right there. Now what that does for us is it basically saves us for having to write down these personal pronouns. All right, now once again, why would we put these personal pronouns in there? We would put them in there for the sake of emphasis, trying to underscore that, I have kept. You're trying to say it was I that did it, and emphasizing the person who has done that. If you're just not trying to make an emphasis, then you can just scratch these all together and just learn the ending forms. And by the way, as I said before, those are always going to be the same with all of the verbs. All right, let's continue on down with the list. If you wanted to say you have kept, this of course is feminine. The second one down, trying to express it, we're talking about a woman who has kept. This would be align itself with the personal pronoun at, and it'd be shamart. Shamart. You, feminine, have kept, and it aligns itself with the personal pronoun at. Next, he or it has kept. In the masculine, this is what we've been learning all along. Shamar. Shamar. That's the third person masculine singular, and it aligns itself with the pronoun who. And then she or it has kept feminine. And we've also learned this, shamra or shamara, and that aligns itself with the pronoun he. All right, let's drop down and look at the plural. And this, we wanted to say we have kept. Once again, like the singular, the masculine and feminine are both together, so that's one less thing you have to learn. This aligns itself with a knock new, and if you wanted to say we have kept, you would say shamarnu, shamarnu would be how that would be pronounced. And once again, understand what we're trying to say. We're trying to say that you don't have to put the anaknu in addition to the verb if you have the noon and the shurik at the end of the word as a suffix. That takes the place of saying we have kept. All right. Next, if you wanted to say you have kept, masculine, that is taking the place of the pronoun atem. This would be shamartem. Shamartem. All right. And then the one right below that, expressing the feminine you have kept. And once again, talking about a group of women that have kept something. This takes the place of the personal pronoun aten. And this would be expressed shemartin. Shemartin. And then the second from the bottom, we want to talk about a group of men. They have kept. Obviously in the masculine, this takes the place of him, the personal pronoun, and it's expressed shamaru. And then last, we want to say they have kept feminine. It aligns itself with the pronoun hin, and it is just like the masculine, shamaru, shamaru. And so that helps us there too. All right, I want you to note, top of page 82, that the comments in the first syllable becomes of Shiva in the second person plural, both masculine and feminine. And the reason for that is just a shifting of the accent. Other than that, everything stays the same, and you have the comet patak series. Comets underneath the first letter, patak underneath the second letter. Well, that's the way it stays with all of these verbs, with the exception of the second person masculine and feminine plural. All right, then also we have a biblical word list on page 82, number 3. This is our fourth biblical word list, and this includes the word land, artits, and the word one, echad, and then the word Lord, which we've talked about before, Adonai, and then also the word God, Elohim, which is also El. And our book encourages us not to confuse El with the preposition El, which is pronounced virtually the same, but nevertheless one represents God and the other means the Hebrew preposition to. All right, those are 4 more words to add. Now, when learning the perfect tense, you must be able to distinguish between the root of the verb and the suffixes. For example, you have to be able to look at the particular word and say, well, that's the triliteral root, and that is the suffix. All right? For example, let's go over to the board one more time, and I'll demonstrate what we're talking about here. You have to be able to look at this and say, all right, I understand that the triliteral root is this right here, nun, tav, nun, and that this is a suffix. All right, if I wanted to change that to I gave, or that wouldn't make sense with the feminine pronoun there, would it? All right, you look at that, and you're reading the Hebrew Bible, and you look at that and you say, what on earth is that? Well, you've got to be able to recognize that this is a triliteral root, this is a suffix. Okay, so that's something that's very important for you to be able to recognize. All right. Also, you need to bear in mind that the Hebrew perfect tense expresses several different past tenses in other languages. For example, we were talking about the word to eat, akalnu. That can be we ate, we have eaten, we had eaten, we did eat, or we have been eating. And so that's something that is a number of different ways that you can express that in Hebrew. Also, we talked a little bit about, we have in this lesson something that we talked a little bit about in previous lessons, and that is that when you get to the tetragrammaton, which your book explains or talks a little bit about on the bottom of page 82, the personal name for God in the Old Testament, sometimes pronounced Yahweh or Yahweh, that is going to be pronounced Adonai when we get to that in the text. All right? Now, let's, in the exercises, we have, it says to recite the perfect tense of the following verbs, and we'll not take the time to do that, but that's basically what that's trying to do. Like if we were going to take the word lamad and go ahead and recite that, we'd say lamati, that means I have learned. Lamata, that means you, masculine singular, have learned. Lamat, that means you, feminine. Lamad, that's just the he has learned. And then lamada, that's she has learned, and so on. So that's what you're needing to learn there. All right? And then it wants us to write the perfect and present tense of the following verbs. and that's something that you also need to work on your own. And then it has translate the following into English. Let's go to the screen here and look at these things that we're going to translate the following into English. All right, we have the first one, which is Yashiva. Yashiva, that would be translated she sat. Number 3, we'll skip the evens again. Lamadnu, that would be translated we learned. All right, that's what you'll be able to say by the time we finish these 18 lessons. All right, and then number 5, we have Ganevu. Ganevu, that would be pronounced they stole. All right, how about number 7? That'd be Halakha. She walked. Notice the feminine ending on that. Number 9, Amar. That's our simple he said. Okay, going across to number 11, we have Lamada. That's she learned. And we're kind of skipping some of the ones that are a little bit harder. Let's go ahead and look at number 12. Shamart. That's you, feminine, guarded. And then number 13, Yeshevtan. That would be you, feminine, plural, sat, and so on. All right. Then in the section right below that, it says to write the perfect tense of the following verbs as indicated. All right, we have ani. All right, let's go to the board and do some of these together so we can see what it is that we're talking about. All right, so it's given us ani, and what it's wanting us to do is take the verb yashav and put those two together. In other words, you got the word for sat and you've got the personal pronoun for I. So how do you come up with an answer there? Well, it'd be take our triliteral root. How do I put I on the end of a verb? Well, I do it by adding T like that, and then that's the way that it would go ahead and be pronounced. All right? Then you have some others to do of that, and we'll not take time to do that right now. Let's read together the bottom of that particular page. It says read aloud and translate the following into English. And so let's do that together and see how well you're doing on your translating. All right. Number 1 on the bottom of that page is Shamar ha-Kelev al-ha-Ba'it ve'al-ha-Yeled. This would be translated, the dog watched over the house and the boy. All right, we'll just do the first 3, although there are 7 of them. The next one would be pronounced ha-Lakti el-ha-Hasade Beli ha-Se-Farim. This would be I walked to the field without the books. Number 3, Yashva ha-Yalda Takat ha-Etz ve-Lameda. That would be the girl sat under the tree and learned. All right, that concludes what we'll cover here. There are more things to do in the exercises, but those are things that you need to proceed with and do on your own. grade your own work. Go back in the book and make sure, double check your answers and make sure that you've got those right. And when you've got this vocabulary down and you have these lessons learned, especially, do not proceed until you have the perfect tense of the strong verb, both in the singular and the plural. When you have that down, then you can proceed on to lesson number 15. Keep in there. Keep up the good work.